Working like it's supposed to. Excellent. Hi, everyone. Awesome. Well, welcome to WLF. Tonight we're going to be covering all the things that you need to know, or at least some of the things that you need to know about bariatric surgery, what to expect, what obesity is, what the causes of obesity are, what some of the treatments are, what some of the different surgeries are that are available. And then we're also going to cover a little bit about our program and a little bit about our post-operative program. So you can feel free to ask any questions as we move along, and we're going to get started. If you miss any of it, or if your connection doesn't work very good, don't worry. We will send you a link afterwards to the video recording. So don't worry too much if you get locked out, or if there's Wi-Fi issues or anything like that. So my name is Melanie Wildman. I am the founder of WLF Medical. I had my surgery back in 2009. And I'm almost 7 years out from my surgery. You can see my little guy and I on the far left, and then my little guy and I at Christmas time here in front of the fireplace. And this is my family. And that's really why I had weight loss surgery. I struggled with my weight my entire life as an adult and during some of my teenage years. And I tried every diet known to man and wound up learning about the sleeve through my sister-in-law, who is a professor of nutritional sciences at Cornell. She's my brother, her husband, is also a doctor, as are my other two brothers. And it was through them that I learned about the sleeve gastrectomy. And it was through them that I decided that I made the decision. It was with their support that I made the decision to have surgery. And of course, I didn't qualify under the Canadian system, and I went out of country and I had surgery in Mexico. I thought I had done my research. I even had my brothers help me to look into where I was going, but it turned out where I was going, the surgeon was using credentials that were not accurate. He was not actually a bariatric surgeon. And in fact, the doctor that he worked with was not a doctor at all. He had photoshopped his licenses. So everything that I was looking at was actually photoshopped, and I didn't realize that until well after I was already home. I had significant complications. I developed eventually a stricture, but all of my incisions were infected. They didn't close for months. It was about 4 months by the time all of my incisions finally closed. So I had nausea, extreme nausea, for about the first 6 months after surgery, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was supposed to be eating, what I was supposed to be doing, and it was a very frightening time, not just for me, but for my whole family. So that's how WLF got its start, was as a support group, and we developed a support program from there, and we partnered with Dr. Pompa. And together we achieved our Center of Excellence designation. That was how we started with our tracking and our support programs. So ever since then, back starting in early 2011, we've been tracking all of the data on our patient outcomes. So we know now, we have a very, very robust data. We know well what works and why some patients do really well and why some patients struggle more after surgery. And so that's a big part of what we do, and a big part of what your success is going to be. So what is obesity? Obesity is simply a medical condition in which excess body fat is accumulated to the point that it has an adverse effect on our health and on our life expectancy. It's the leading preventable cause in death of Canada. It's actually overtaken smoking, and it's one of the most serious problems that we deal with in Canada. Some of the health issues around obesity are chronic, and others just simply increase your risk of developing certain conditions. So everything from stroke to fatty liver disease to type 2 diabetes, pulmonary issues, all sorts of things are very closely related to weight. And we know that many of those are resolved or improved after bariatric surgery. So some obesity-related medical conditions include effect on our brain. When we're very heavy, it actually affects our brain tissue. So research has shown that in patients that are obese, our brains actually look 16 years older than people who are normal body weight. Now, I like to joke there is some research that shows that that's improved after surgery, but I still lose my keys all the time, so maybe the jury's out on that one a little bit. We do know that mortality increases proportionally to obesity. So the more obese you are, the more likely you are to have an increased risk of mortality. And in fact, there was another study that came out that looked specifically at men and at male patients who suffer from obesity, and they have a 4 times greater risk of mortality by the time they reach the age 55 if they are clinically obese. So the difference is quite striking. A woman who has a body mass index of just 32 has been associated with double the mortality rate over a 16-year period than someone in normal body weight. And that was actually my BMI the day of my surgery. My highest BMI was about 36, but the day of my surgery it was 31.6. So that gives you some of an indication of what some of the risks are to remaining obese. Severe obesity or BMI of over 40 can reduce life expectancy, and some studies have shown over 20 years. And there was just actually a report, it was a meta-analysis that was just done on mortality rate and obesity. And what these researchers did is instead of looking at whether someone was obese at the time that they asked them for the questionnaire, which is what a lot of studies do, they actually looked at, has the individual had a history of obesity? And that way they're able to, it's a more accurate reflection of what's going on in the health and lifestyle of all the subjects in the study. And what they found is that the risks of mortality were actually higher than would have been reported in other studies. Complications of obesity, 1 in 5 deaths in Canada are the result of obesity. We're getting heavier, and as we get heavier, weight discrimination is actually increased. You would think as more of us struggle with our weight that we would be, kinder to each other and have more compassion and understand what we're going through, but that's actually not the case. Discrimination against those of us that struggle with their weight has increased over 66% over the last decade. We know studies have even shown that more than 1 in 4, it's about 28% of teachers believe that being obese is the worst thing that can happen to someone, worse than developing cancer, worse than rape, so they listed that as being the worst thing that could happen. 24% of medical professionals actually admitted that they were repulsed by their own obese patients. And another study looked at, they actually interviewed 389 medical professionals who actually treat people and study obese subjects, and they found that those same health professionals still associated the stereotypes of lazy, stupid, and worthless with obese people, and infer that the obesity comes from blameworthy characteristics, which is really common in society, but it's also common throughout the medical establishment. So people who suffer from obesity are actually more likely to not have medical conditions diagnosed as quickly, because it's often chalked up to, well, just lose a little bit of weight and you'll feel better. But also it's much more difficult when you have a lot more adipose tissue. Sometimes it's much more difficult to try and isolate what the problem is or what's wrong. So we know also in terms of discrimination that it doesn't just happen in schools, and it doesn't just happen in hospitals, but it also happens in our jobs. So women who are obese earn about 24% less than women who are normal body weight. And we see this even in people applying for work, when they did a study where they actually dressed people up to appear to be heavier, not even obese, just overweight. And they were significantly less willing to hire overweight women than they were normal weight women. 87% of obese patients reported that their weight prevented them from being hired for a job. 90% reported being stigmatized by coworkers. 84% avoided being in public places because of their weight, and 77% reported feeling depression on a daily basis. But we know that 14 months after surgery, 90% reported substantially increased cheerfulness. 92% reported rarely ever perceiving prejudice after surgery. And 100% reported reduced discrimination. And I'm a perfect example of that. How I'm treated now is very, very different than how I was treated when I was heavy. This is Barb Hine, one of our patients, and you can see her in March 2005, and then you can see her in October of 2015. So she's done really, really well. But what an amazing difference, and you can even see it in her face. So one of the things that you'll hear from us a lot is that obesity is not your fault. And we're not trying to say that diet and lifestyle are not a significant contributing factor to obesity. They really are it is one of the leading factors, which we will discuss. But as a society, the food that we eat and the food in our food supply, what happens to our gut flora, all of these things are very complex. So obesity is a complex clinical disorder with many contributing causes and factors. And you'll hear me say this a lot. I say this to people a lot. If it was that easy, we would all be thin. And furthermore, if it was that easy, the people who have chefs and cooks and now own Weight Watchers wouldn't struggle with their weight over and over again. They would have the support that they need and they would be able to lose the weight. And they simply can't. We see it with celebrities that have more resources than the average person, and yet we always believe it's us. So what are some of the strongest correlators between obesity and what's going on in our environment? Well, one of them is actually maternal size and weight gain during pregnancy. And we know this because of two types of studies. They have looked at women who had children prior to bariatric surgery when they were still obese. The children who were born from the mother when she was still obese are 4 to 5 times more likely to develop obesity themselves by the time they reach 18 years old than their younger siblings who were born after the mother had bariatric surgery. The researchers actually described it as that the children who went through gestation when their mothers were obese, it was like they were percolating in sugar. We know that the opposite to be true. We know that the heavier mom gets, so if she starts out slim and her first child is born when she is slimmer, that child will be less likely to develop obesity. And we know other health issues like heart disease, etc., irrespective of their weight, also happen, so that when she gains weight, later pregnancies, the children from the later pregnancies are more likely to gain weight. We know whether and for how long you were breastfed has a protective effect. So some studies have shown as much as 4 times less likely to develop obesity from a mother who exclusively breastfed for an entire year compared to a child who was bottle fed from the very beginning. There's actually some interesting studies that have just come out very lately looking at gut flora of the mother at the time of gestation, and looking also at mothers who were given antibiotics during their pregnancy that affected the gut flora, and that seems to also have there's at least a correlation there between even antibiotics and what happens with our gut flora and later development of obesity. Genetics is a big factor. We know it's a big factor. We know from twin studies that that twins tend to stay the same body shape even when they're raised in different environments. And we also know, of course, one of the biggest factors is our lifestyle factor. The problem is that obesity is not a simple cause and effect. It's not a question of if I take in fewer calories, I'm going to magically lose the weight. How many calories you bring in is an important part of the picture, but we think of weight as being inert. We think of it as just being this energy source that's this padding that kind of goes on and it doesn't really do anything. But that's not true. Our fat, our adipose tissue, affects our hormones. It affects what hormones we produce, and it affects how our body then in turn protects those very fat stores. So the heavier you are, the more ghrelin you produce, the less sensitive, you are to leptin, so you don't feel as full as someone who is normal weight. And we know that that's now a function of how much that's affected by how much fat you actually have on your body. So to think that, like a skinny person, if you just eat a little bit less and you drop 4 or 5 pounds and you can keep that off long term, to think that someone who needs to lose 80, 100, 200 pounds, that they can overcome all of the processes that their body has to conserve that fat and magically lose that weight, it's not supported by science. It's not supported by the research, and it's one of the reasons why once you gain the weight, it's so incredibly difficult to lose it again. And then, of course, not to mention that our food itself is highly addictive. I mean, when you're basically living on sugars and simple carbohydrates, then we do damage our bodies in all sorts of ways, starting with our gut flora to our brain function to how our bodies actually become addicted to sugar. So some of the top obesity causes, we know that identical twins grow up with the same body fatness even when they're raised by different types of families. We know that we've adopted these strategies in order to survive. I mean, can you imagine if you met, a caveman who's used to hunting or used to gathering, and try and explain our modern lifestyle? Yeah, so I go to this thing called Tim Hortons and I go through the drive-through and I get my double, and the concept would blow your mind, even a few hundred years ago. We humans have evolved during times of intermittent famine. We've gone for long periods of time where there's been extreme food scarcity through most of human history, and then we've gone through intermittent periods where there's been an abundance of food. And if you look at ancient human literature, it's all around the ability to get food. It's pretty fascinating stuff. There's even been some really interesting studies where they looked at the Last Supper, and they looked at the depictions of the Last Supper, the very earliest ones, which were about 300 AD, going all the way up to 1600, so over a 1,000-year span. And what they found was, over that 1,000-year span, the depictions of the size of the food relative to the people had doubled in size over that 1,000 years, just going from that 4 to 600, 3 to 600 AD to 1600 AD. So pretty fascinating stuff. We eat, all of us, even skinny people, a lot more than we ever. Multiple studies have shown over and over again that unless we significantly change our entire economic system, we are going to be dealing with obesity for the foreseeable future. So if losing weight were as easy as just adopting a new lifestyle, no one would be obese. No one would choose this for themselves. Now I want to talk a little bit about the hormone ghrelin. Prior to 1996, we didn't even know what ghrelin was, or leptin for that matter. But ghrelin is our primary circulating hunger hormone. It is the hormone that makes you want food. It actually instructs your body to store fat. You release more insulin and you become more resistant to that very insulin, which then stores what you're eating, especially carbohydrates. It stores that as body fat. And it slows down your resting metabolic rate. So ghrelin does all sorts of things, which would be really great in a time of famine, but it's less helpful in a time of excess food. We know that mice that are fed the equivalent amount of ghrelin that an obese person naturally produces, that mouse will literally eat and eat and eat. They don't get full. But on top of that, even when they restrict their calories to the same as the mouse that doesn't have ghrelin, they still develop obesity, even on the same normal caloric intake that the other mice don't get heavy on. And that's simply because of the profound effect that ghrelin has on how we store fat. So it makes us feel hungry, it slows our metabolism, it decreases our ability to burn fat. And on top of all of that, we know that it's very closely related to our reward system in our brain. So it's one of the reasons why so many of our patients quit smoking through this process, and they remain non-smokers. About 85% remain non-smokers even 2 years after surgery. And I suspect, or we suspect, that that has something to do with the reduction in ghrelin after the surgery. We know that one of the reasons why we start the cycle when we lose weight on a diet, and then when we stop that diet, we gain back more weight than when we started, is actually the culprit is ghrelin. As soon as you reduce your caloric intake, ghrelin spikes. Now, what researchers have found is that even 6 months after the diet is over and participants have gone back to eating normally, their ghrelin levels stay elevated. So that's one, at least one. It is a complicated area, but it's one of the factors that seems to be implicated in why we tend to gain back even more weight after a diet ends. This is Dr. Jeffrey Friedman. He actually is the co-discoverer of the hormone leptin. He's won the Shaw Prize, and he's dedicated his life. He's done some absolutely amazing research around hormones and obesity. He very much views obesity as being a problem with our hormones as opposed to a problem of willpower or self-will. And he says blaming someone for being obese is like blaming someone for being short. You know, the main causes of obesity are not eating too much, and they're not a lack of exercise. And I love that. I find that it's such a great way of looking at it. We would never look at someone who was short and say, well, you're obviously your parents, obviously you didn't eat enough protein, right? We have compassion for people who have things that happen to them that we believe are not in their ultimate control. But the reason why as a society we have very little compassion for those who struggle with their weight is because somehow we believe that they've done this to themselves, even though that's not supported by research. So what about exercise? We're told all the time, and there was big controversy all over the news the last few months where Coca-Cola got caught red-handed with numerous universities doing research where they're funding all of this research that comes out and says, well, it's not about what you're eating, it's about how much you're exercising, right? We saw this with Michelle Obama started talking about, you know, eating healthy foods and not eating sugar, and she got shut down really, really quickly. And now the message was, no, let's get out here and exercise. And so we know that a lot of that was funded by big food that has a very, you know, clear interest in this. In fact, if you may not even know this, but Coca-Cola, their former head of marketing actually said, how can we drive more calories into more mouths more often? That is our goal. That was publicly stated. So when a larger study that was done at the Mayo Clinic in 2010 found that when you exercise, even if you do burn off calories, your bodies actually crave more calories and you make up for it. You actually eat a little more, and your resting metabolic rate actually decreases a little bit in order to make up for it. And so your body still tries to maintain that weight. And people also vastly overestimate how many calories they burn from exercise, and they underestimate how much food they have. And I'm a huge fan of exercise. Exercise is awesome. You feel so good after yoga. You feel so good when you're just lifting weights at the gym. You feel great about yourself. You can sleep better. It's good for your sex life. It's good for your skin. It's good for your brain function. It's good for your lung function. It reduces your risk of osteoporosis. The list of benefits from exercise are very, very long. There's almost no other thing you can do in your life that's going to be better for you than exercise. But the one thing it's not good at is helping you lose weight. And that's why I believe so many of us don't exercise, because we do it not because we want to or because we think it will make us feel good. We do it because we're hoping to lose weight. And then when the weight does not come off, we get discouraged and we stop exercising. We sort of do it as a punishment for our weight. And I believe that if we're able to change our thinking around exercise to be something that you do for yourself, something that's actually fun. You do it in a group setting. If it's yoga, you go with a friend. It's something social that you do that you enjoy, that's for you. You're much more likely to stick with it than when you're doing it because you're wanting to lose 5 pounds. So the reality is, and study after study after study after study has shown this, that between 95 and 98% of those who lose weight will regain it within 3 to 5 years. And we also know that for people who are clinically obese, that number reaches almost virtually zero. Virtually zero. In fact, there hasn't been a study that has shown diet and exercise to be effective long-term for people who suffer from obesity. None. The reality of losing significant weight and keeping it off more than 3 years is about the same as surviving stage 4 lung cancer. So just to put it into perspective, even though we're guilted all the time, and the message we get is that somehow we just don't have enough willpower. In fact, in 2009, the FDA declared that not a single company in the entire industry could show a record of long-term success. Companies like Weight Watchers often tout their results, but those results are abysmal. They're actually a fraction of a percentage point that managed to keep off the weight over the 6-year period of time that they were tracking through when you look at their own numbers. We actually have a blog where we've done a little bit of math and we've showed you from their own numbers exactly how effective Weight Watchers really is. The other reality is that the big diet firms are owned by the junk food company. So Jenny Craig is owned by Nestle, Weight Watchers is owned by Cool Brands, and now has a big stake with Oprah Winfrey. Slim Fast, for example, is owned by Unilever. So these guys are all earning money off both sides, right? So they're on the one hand, they're creating Aero bars and Gushers, and then on the other hand, they're telling us not to eat them. They're getting paid on both. So, and it's a big industry. It's very, very expensive. So there's a reason why they're doing it. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're running diet programs because they're expensive and because people don't do well at them. So they have to continue to pay for them. So it's a great business to be in. In fact, the monthly cost of diets, you can see them broken down here according to Forbes. So Jenny Craig's the most expensive, working its way down. And it's actually less expensive to have surgery than not have surgery at all, because of the savings on your food bill, as well as the savings on medications, and even the differences in earnings after surgery because of reduced discrimination. We also know, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go through, but the government of Alberta did a study not that many years ago, and they found that they recouped the cost of bariatric surgery in under 2 years per patient, and yet they still grossly underfunded. It's so underfunded across Canada, even though it has a net financial benefit for every patient. So if the government of Canada really wanted to save money on our healthcare costs, the first thing that we would do is adequately fund bariatric programs and put me out of business. That is what the government should be doing. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. The only permanent treatment of severe or morbid obesity is bariatric surgery. Sounds like a radical statement, but that's the Canadian Medical Association positioning statement in 2009. Diet and exercise have not proven effective strategies for weight loss, which has prompted the explosion of bariatric surgery from the American College of Surgeons. These are some of the resolutions from obesity, everything from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome. We actually get asked a lot, what about babies after surgery? And we have, WLF is really proud to say we have lots of really healthy sleeper babies, we call them. But many women are infertile because of the extra weight that they're carrying. And after they have weight loss surgery and a safe time has elapsed and they're done their weight loss journey, they're actually safely able to have children. And those children are at much less risk. They're at less risk during their pregnancy, and the child themselves has significantly less risk of developing obesity and then other related comorbidities. So why does surgery work well? Well, there's really 2 reasons. There's 2 methods. One is purely restrictive and the other is metabolic changes. So There's three main types of surgeries. There are others, but there's three main types of surgeries. The first one is the gastric bypass, the second is the lap band, and the third is the sleeve gastrectomy. Now, the gastric bypass is exactly what it sounds like. It bypasses, creates a pouch at the top of what was the stomach, and then bypasses the stomach. And you can see that there with the in the image. I don't know if you can see my mouse move around, but you can see where the gastric bypass is. And it works two ways. One is the obvious, it restricts how much food you can eat. And then the other one is that it's malabsorptive. And what that means is especially fats and carbohydrates, or excuse me, especially fats and to a much lesser degree proteins are not as well absorbed in the intestines. So the fat can actually pass through without being fully absorbed. The problem with it, and the problem with all bariatric surgeries, is that sugar is fully absorbed. So the most addictive foods, the foods that wreak the most havoc on us, are sugars. And so that the gastric bypass does not help you with sugar. So if you wind up eating a diet high, and this is true with the sleeve, this is true with the lap band, if you're having bariatric surgery and you're hoping to just eat anything you want afterwards, then that's not the reality. You're not going to have nearly as successful a result if you're not also able to use your surgery as a tool. So the gastric bypass is the gold standard of bariatric surgery. It has an excellent track record. It does have slightly higher complication rates after surgery. It has slightly higher hospital readmission rates as well, but it has comparable long-term outcomes to the sleeve gastrectomy. So they both have fairly similar outcomes. The gastric bypass also, you can't take NSAIDs, and you can have nutritional deficiencies. You do have to take a multivitamin for the rest of your life, and you do have to be careful to make sure that you're getting in all of the nutrients that you need to have. The lap band is a procedure, and I'll be very honest with you, it's one that we don't recommend. For a few reasons. There's been several studies now. There's about 4 or 5 studies that have looked at the long-term effects of the lap band, and they've all found about half of the lap bands have to come out after about 10 years. The number one reason is slippage, followed by erosion. So the band itself that goes around the top of the stomach, your food goes in, the band restricts it, so it's restrictive only, and then you have a port that remains in your abdominal cavity. And you fill that with a saline solution to adjust the band, either to make it larger or smaller, depending on how your weight loss is going. The problem with that is the problem of any sort of foreign object that can move around, get dislocated, or start to cause erosion or a buildup of scar tissue, which can often happen. So we've seen, and we've had to repair lap bands that were done elsewhere with many patients who have come to us with failed lap bands, and we've seen everything from, we had one mother where the port actually protruded all the way through her abdominal wall. We had another woman where it completely embedded in her bowels. So these are very difficult surgeries to manage afterwards. So we really don't see the benefit in it, especially because weight loss is significantly less with the lap band than with either the sleeve or the gastric bypass. The sleeve is the procedure that I chose to have. I chose to have it simply because it's permanent. You remove 80% of your stomach. It does not come back. You do not grow it back. And your stomach is also where ghrelin is primarily produced, also produced in your pancreas, but it's also primarily produced in the lining of your stomach. The sleeve gastrectomy has one of the lowest readmission rates and resurgery rates, and it is a very safe, tends to be a very safe procedure. All surgeries carry risk. They are absolutely major surgeries, so it's important to understand that, and we will cover some of the risks as we come along. So some of the pros to the sleeve are that your body absorbs nutrients the same before and after the surgery. You have restriction because your stomach is smaller, and then you do have changes in your metabolic rate and in your hormone balance. So They looked at ghrelin levels, the sleeve and the lap band, and there's a significant decrease long-term in ghrelin production with the gastric bypass, with both the gastric bypass and the sleeve, but to a greater degree with the sleeve. And I'm going to show you a little bit here why that is. And I'm going to geek out on you. I just think this stuff is super fascinating. So this is excess weight loss at 1 month in the light gray color, and then this is excess weight loss at 6 months in the dark gray color. So this is LSG, which means laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy, and this is LAGB, or laparoscopic adjustable gastric banding. So you can see here that at 1 month, the sleevers have lost about the same amount of weight as a lap band patient has on average at 6 months. So there's a significant difference in outcome. Over here is why. So as we had mentioned before, when you saw the slide with the study on what happens when you diet, your ghrelin level goes way up. Well, because you're having a sleeve gastrectomy, you're on a very strict preoperative diet. That does not happen with the gastric bypass patients, or excuse me, lap band patients. So you can see the ghrelin is spiked prior to surgery. So preoperative, high ghrelin on the LSG, or the sleeve gastrectomy patients. And then you can see day 1, it's plummeted. And then you can see at 1 month and at 6 months, it stays quite constant, nice and low ghrelin production. Over here is the lap band, and you can see they were not on a strict preoperative diet. There is their ghrelin level. Preoperatively, day 1, it dips a little bit, but you can see it's much higher than the sleeve. And then it grows by the time they're at 1 month. And then you can see here at 6 months, a huge spike in the amount of ghrelin that they're producing, but also a huge difference in how individuals are responding to it. That's a pretty big, wide variability in ghrelin production. So that's one of the reasons why we think the banding isn't as effective long term. Same thing, ghrelin sleeve versus gastric bypass. Both had markedly reduced ghrelin after, but there was a greater degree of ghrelin reduction in sleeve patients compared to gastric bypass patients, which is simply because the stomach is still there. It's not connected to your digestive system, from your esophageal gastric junction on through. It's no longer connected, but it's still there, so it's still producing ghrelin. According to the Canadian Medical Association, there's 600 times more demand for bariatric surgery in Canada than there is capacity. We actually have not just chronic underfunding, but we also don't have enough bariatric surgeons in Canada. 5.5 million Canadians 18 and older are obese, and another 8.6 million are overweight. But Canada as a whole only performs about 5,900 bariatric procedures a year. That's going back to 2013. And at that rate, it would take over 300 years to provide treatment to all of the eligible morbidly obese Canadians. So that's how far behind we are in being able to live. That's why I have Our Lady from the 1700s here, because that's the distance and time we would have to travel at our current rate of treatment to be able to treat everyone who actually needs the surgery. And that's only including our morbidly obese patients. That is not including everyone who is actually obese. These are the wait times across Canada. For example, British Columbia, I sat with one of the government officials on a flight from British Columbia. She was with BC Health, and we got chatting. She was asking what I did, and so I told her what I did, and I asked her about it, and I said, so like you really don't fund very much bariatric surgery? And her response was, well, we don't really have a problem with obesity. It's not like the rest of Canada. And so once I tried to get my head wrapped around that and not overreact in the seat next to her, I said to her, well, do you know how many surgeries you do a year? And she said, no, I don't really know. And I said, well, you did 178 surgeries last year. And I said, and you have about 5,000 people on your wait list. And she said, that's right. And proceeded to tell me that their wait times were only about 2 years in British Columbia. And I said, well, I'm not a mathematician here, but if you did 178 surgeries and you've got 5,000 people on your wait list, you're talking about over 25 years. So, and this is true all the way across the province. There was a CBC television news. They had the in Saskatchewan. They actually had the bariatric program there went on CBC television and said that they proudly said that they had well over 700 people on their wait list, and they were aiming to do about 70 surgeries in the province that year. So, I mean, you do the math. We're talking about 10 years. But they turned around and said that their wait time was about a year to a year and a half. So you can see this, it's this pattern, it's the same pattern all the way across the province. People are on wait lists, they're on them for many, many years, and it's really become a lottery who's going to be chosen to go through and get bariatric surgery. And I would love to see a day where it's included and it's covered under the provincial system. So I think every Canadian deserves access to healthcare, and I think it is a right, and I wish that we weren't in business. We have other ways that we could be helping people, and right now people are going to unsafe places and having unsafe surgeries, and they're coming back without support. So this is an area that we really feel the government needs to step up. People are dying, people are suffering. Someone is suffering today with their weight, and people are choosing to go out of country. And they're going to really scary places like I did, where there's no screening, there's no post-operative follow-up and support. They have very high complication rates. They have lower overall weight loss outcomes. They have unknown sterile protocols. They don't even know what's going on in the OR. There's a risk of blood-borne diseases. There's no legal recourse. You can't sue as a foreign national. You can't sue someone in Mexico. There's outright fraud, and there's fake credentials are just a few of the issues that we see for people who are going out of country. There's no oversight. There's no ability to know whether someone is a safe place or whether someone is not a safe place. And a lot of Canadians assume that that oversight exists because it exists here. However, it doesn't. This is an actual OR that's promoted in Canada up here. So it's an OR in Mexico. Canadians are being encouraged to go there. There was actually just an article today on CBC News, a surgeon in Mexico who used to perform in Ontario who sexually assaulted a whole bunch of his patients is actually now performing in Mexico and is, as of right now, recruiting patients from Alberta to go there for bariatric surgeries, convicted, I believe, of sexual assault of multiple patients. So these are the kinds of risks that people don't even realize they have when they go out of country. Just to give you an idea, the OR, people are going there and they think this looks like a safe OR. These are all the things that are wrong with it. Everything from, the insufflator is too small, laparoscopic equipment is outdated. There's unsterilized pillows. There's anesthesia equipment that doesn't have it's missing capnographer monitors. I mean, you can just go on and on and on and on, all of the things that are completely unsafe about this OR. And then what happens if there is a complication, right? Foreign hospitals won't start treatment without payment. At least in the United States and Canada, if you are in critical condition, the hospital will treat you no matter what. If you're not a Canadian citizen, but you're in Canada and you're in critical condition, you will get care. If you're in the United States, it's a myth. Canadians believe that in the United States, that they will demand payment. They will make you leave, but not if you're critical. But in Mexico, those protections do not exist. So you need to come up with a credit card. It's not enough to say, do your research. People speak to other people and they'll say, oh, it was clean, oh, it was great, I know so-and-so that went there. That is not research. That does not help you. That did not help me. Seeing is not believing. I asked for all my surgeons' licenses. I saw them all. I thought I was doing my research, but they weren't real. So potentially contracting serious conditions like hepatitis or HIV, unfortunately, are realities. So the only way that someone has to know whether where they're going or not is safe is to have an International Center of Excellence designation. That's a designation that is through the American Surgical Review Corporation, which is a part of the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery, which is part of the College of Physicians and Surgeons in the United States. And every hospital that gets the designation has randomized inspections. They have to meet protocols which only the top 2% of American hospitals meet. And that in order to keep up their license as a designated International Center of Excellence, they have to meet that criteria on an ongoing basis, including all of the support and follow-up that we do. All of that data gets handed over on a monthly basis to ICE, to the International Center of Excellence, through the BOLD program. That's the only way to know that you're safe. That's the only way to know if the OR is follows modern sterile protocols, has appropriate equipment, that everyone in the OR has the licenses, the certification, and the training that they need to have by law. That's the only way to know that you're safe, is that it is at an International Center of Excellence. And in fact, there was a study that was done in 2013 where they looked at accredited hospitals with an International Center with a designation compared to non-accredited hospitals in the United States. And patients were 3 times more likely to die at a non-accredited hospital in the United States having bariatric surgery than they were at an accredited hospital. Now imagine, that's in the United States, imagine what the complication rate must be in Mexico, where they don't even have statistics because there's no such thing as reporting. This is Dr. Mehran Anvari. He is the president of the Canadian Association of Bariatric Physicians and Surgeons, and he said to Post Media News in 2012, the risks of bariatric surgery are lower when performed in specialized high-volume centers of excellence. So that's how you know, and that's why we're so passionate about this, because it's literally saving lives. It's literally saving lives. So surgery alone is not the answer. Anyone that says, well, you can eat anything you want, you can eat French fries, you can eat junk food all the time, and you can stay skinny. Surgery is a tool, and it levels the playing field. It gives you a chance to be able to manage your weight without food controlling you anymore. But you still have to be compliant. You still have to make the lifestyle changes to go with it. It's just much, much easier after you have bariatric surgery. It's much easier to do. Weight regain at 3 and 5 years without a comprehensive support program. 30% will have some weight regain by year 3, 44% by year 4. Excess weight loss after 5 years without a support program. With a support program, patients actually lose twice as much weight as they do when they go on their own and they don't go to a support program. So with a support program and regular proper follow-up, they lose on average 113 pounds. On their own, they lose an average of 57 pounds. So really, really important to understand just how big a difference ongoing support, education, nutrition planning, all of those things are. Excess weight after sleeve gastrectomy. So this is our results compared to the average ASMBS results, which is the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. And that's simply because of our follow-up, because we have in-depth, comprehensive follow-up, meal plans, recipes, what to eat, what not to eat. We've got tracking for you. You have the ability to track what you're doing. There's an app actually coming out for patients. So we have your post-op Bible that gives you absolutely everything that you need to know, from warning signs to it's big. And it covers all of these things because they're important to know. And then you get all of the reminders with your coach. You have someone to talk to at every stage. One of the things that I found so hard is I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but also had no one to just go and ask. And that was very lonely. And as a bariatric patient, we all do better when we're with other people who are on the same journey. Our average patient starts out with a BMI of 41.7. That's our average BMI. At 2 years, our average BMI is 25.7. Our average patients lost 111.2 pounds on average, which is a reduction of 97.2 pounds. The average sleeve patient loses an average of 77% of excess weight, and ours lose more than that. And that's simply because of the follow-up, the follow-up, the follow-up, the follow-up. We also track how our patients do after surgery on all sorts of different, we have 72 data points that we collect. and we're able to see different patterns and see what some of the outcome differences are in patients. Comparison of surgical complications. So the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery averages and WLF averages. So you can see our averages from 2014. We have not compiled our 2015 yet, but we will be doing that shortly. So you can see deep vein thrombolytis, you can see non-fatal pulmonary embolism, pneumonia, acute respiratory distress syndrome, splenectomy, gastric leak and fistula, postoperative bleeding, small bowel obstruction, and death. And I do want to remind you, all of these are complications that can happen when you have bariatric surgery, or frankly, other than a leak, any major surgery comes with many of these risks. So it's really important that you're prepared, that you understand the risks that come with obesity, and you also understand the risks that come with choosing surgery. And that's why you want to have surgery at the safest hospital that you possibly can. And that's just a close-up so you can see the numbers, and we can send that to you at any time. So our complication rates are lower because we have a longer and more stringent preoperative and postoperative dietary restrictions than almost any other program. We have daily follow-up and education after your surgery and before your surgery. We're an International Bariatric Center of Excellence. We also have the same surgical team, so you don't have different nurses coming in and out depending on the shifts. It's very structured, so it's the same team, it's the same protocols, everything happens in the same step and in the same flow, and it makes it very easy when there is a problem to be able to pinpoint what it was. So we have standardized surgical pathways and protocols, and then the biggest reason is Dr. Pompa. And we know, just like golfers, and there's been some really fascinating studies actually on complication rates from surgeons. Now, not related to bariatric surgery, these were cardiac surgeons, but they know that the surgeons who have the fewest complications have way fewer complications than average ones. And it's sort of like your professional football players or your professional golfers. You can have golfers that golf every day, and they're never going to play the PGA. But you have golfers that play every day, and they are a Tiger Woods, or they are an incredible pro golfer. And that's really the difference, is that there's just a certain subset of surgeons who are incredibly talented. And one of those is Dr. Pompa. She's an incredibly talented, passionate, and compassionate surgeon. She was actually featured in Newsweek magazine as one of the leaders in bariatric surgery. And she's also a big part of why we developed the program the way we want it, because we both knew that support was one of the most important things. So that's why our program has been developed to help patients with the education before their surgery and then all the way through after their surgery. That's why you have a success coach that's certified. She's taken her obesity management counseling at Yale Medical online, and then she's also taken her WLF certified coaching program, and she's had the surgery herself and been successful. That's why you have your own patient login through what we call OPIS, or your online patient information system, and it has all sorts of resources there for our patients. You have your follow-up and your tracking and your reminders to do your follow-up and tracking. Then you have regular support groups. There's support groups all across the country in person, but also online. And then we have recordings of past support groups for you. So if you having issues with any area, you can go and watch the videos on it, or you can reach out to your coach. On top of that, there's menus, literally hundreds and hundreds of recipes for every stage that you would be at. And then we also have a whole YouTube channel full of cooking videos for you just for bariatric patients. So your clears, your fulls, your transition to soft foods are covered, but then so is how to eat long-term after your surgery. So there's an entire channel. Every Friday there's a new video goes up, and that's a resource for you as a bariatric patient. There's some of the clips from it. And then your tracking app is coming out shortly. Our beta is already out, but I can't show you the beta quite yet. But this is exactly what it does. This is what it looks like. One-touch tracking. You can track your food. You can put in your reminders, water, when to take your vitamins, when to have your shakes. You can log your sleep. You can log your weight, and it will track all of that. So you can see, you can even make little before and after pictures and put them side by side and share that with other people that you've chosen to share. So there's some of the screen caps for how your app works. It's pretty slick. We have also developed our own line, Nutricell, which has 10 grams of prebiotic fiber from inulin fiber from the chicory root, as well as 10 grams of ultra-micronized 100% whey protein. And both of those have a multitude of studies showing their efficacy in terms of helping you maintain optimum gut flora, which helps you lose more weight, but also dramatically increasing satiety, so you feel more full, and making sure that you hold onto your muscle mass during periods of weight loss is really, really important, that you get in the macronutrients that you need in order to not lose muscle while you're losing lots of weight. So what was most important to me as a mom is that it didn't have additives and it didn't have chemicals that we don't need. So you can see the ingredient list is really short. Whey protein, inulin from the chicory root, flaxseed, which is where your omega-3 fatty acids are from the flaxseed, and then calcium, vitamin C, and vitamin D, which have been shown to increase protein absorption. And that's it. That's it. So, and it tastes amazing. So I always say this all the time, and you'll get sick of hearing me say it, but the surgery itself is 30 minutes to half an hour, or 30 minutes to 40 minutes. 3 minutes to half an hour doesn't make much sense. The weight loss phase, though, is 6 to 24 months, but your maintenance is a lifetime. Your maintenance is always a lifetime. You will always be a bariatric patient. Here's just a few of our patients from Throwback Thursday on Facebook. They like to share their pictures on Throwback Thursday. Here's just a sampling of a few of our patients over the last few weeks. Here's another one of our patients that posted with her hashtag Love Life. What an amazing difference with Robin. So our average patient in 6 months has lost over half of their average weight. So I ask you tonight, how far ahead would you be had you started 6 months ago? And I think that's one of the things to always think about as you're reaching your goals and as you're moving on to the next stage of your weight loss, is always looking ahead to where you could be and then figuring out, what do I need and what do I need from my coach and where am I going to go from here, and knowing that you're never doing that alone. So there you go. Does anybody have any questions? I know I rattled off a ton of information for all of you. If you do, just email me. You can email me at melanie@wlfmedical.ca, and I'd be happy to share any studies that you want or anything that you see that you're interested in. You can always, of course, reach out to your coach anytime. And I just want to thank you all for spending the evening with me. Once again, any questions at all, always reach out to. We're always here. All right, guys, have an awesome night.